would no longer be appearing due to poor attendance. And this is right on the heels of so-called winning the Drudge Report poll of who won last night's South Carolina debate, where Newt supposedly took charge and defended himself from leaving his wife for another, well, there she is right there, another lady, when his second wife had multiple sclerosis, and this is on the heels of leaving his first wife when she had cancer. And, oh, you could see the guy who gave him a plug right before he left the campaign. Yeah, welcome back, loser, Mr. Perry. Ugh. So, there we go. No one likes Newt, yet they keep telling you he's the one next to Mitt Romney. It's either one of those two. Moving on. Cyborgs are coming. Living brains implanted with electronic chips to replace faulty parts, and they put faulty in quotes. And this is out of the Mail Online. And it goes over in Tel Aviv University. There's a professor, Maddie Mintz, who is out to help the world by fixing the brain. And she says, imagine there's a small area in the brain that is malfunctioning. And imagine that we understand how it works. And we try to replicate this part of the brain with electronics. So I wonder if they're talking about the faulty parts of the brain that make you question authority or speak out when something's wrong, or tell cops to stop when they're bending some woman's arms behind her back because she told her friend, hey, you don't have to take a breathalyzer, which is completely right. So maybe those types of faulty parts is what she's talking about. You know, her intentions may be good, but we know those in power will get that power, and will do it to control the populace and replace those parts in us that are deemed faulty. So that's that. You can check that out in Mail Online. And finally, our last story of the evening comes from the Asia Times, and it's by Pepe Escobar, who will be joining us shortly. The U.S. GCC, Fatal Attraction. GCC stands for Gulf Cooperation Council, the club of 6 wealthy Persian Gulf monarchies, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Oman, Kuwait, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates, founded in 1981, and which in no time configured as the prime strategic U.S. backyard for invasions of Afghanistan in 2001 and Iraq in 2003. And for the long drawn-out battle of the new great game in Eurasia, and also as the headquarters for containing Iran. So we have a map here of the countries shown in there and their strategic importance. You can see Iran right north of there, but they're Saudi Arabia, Oman, UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, and Kuwait. And we have some very lucrative deals with these guys. In fact, they're probably keeping us running with some of their deals. We got in Saudi Arabia, $67 billion arms deal. UAE, we sell them bunker-busting bombs. Oman, Stinger missiles. Kuwait, well, we got 15,000 troops there. And Bahrain, we have a $53 billion arms deal, but it hasn't gone through yet because of their ridiculous human rights violations. So that brings us to this next quote. The rationale for this weaponized orgy is provided by the usual suspect logic, the necessity of building a coalition of the willing to counter Iran. Why Iran? Because Iran is not part of the GCC, that is a pliable U.S. strategy, just like those jolly good times under the Shah. And with more on the U.S.'s dealings in the Middle East and probing up into Iran, we turn to our, I guess he's kind of our foreign correspondent now, ad hoc from the Asia Times, Pepe Escobar. How's it going, sir?
Wonderful. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. We missed you yesterday, but we're glad you could join us today. And we know it's a weird time difference and everything, but you look great. How are things going in Iran? What's going on?
Oh, where to start, in fact? Okay, let's start with the letter that President Obama sent to Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei. This has been all over the Iranian press for the past 48 hours at least. First part of the letter, according to some parliamentarians who actually read it, is threats. Just threats. Second part of the letter is basically roll over and die. This means Iran has to accept the UN sanctions, the unilateral US sanctions, stop enriching uranium to 20%, and then everybody sits down and start talking. So what kind of diplomacy is this, you know?
That's a gun to your head diplomacy, essentially.
Exactly. It's the roll over and die school of diplomacy. You know?
Yeah.
So the thing is, they would be willing to talk to the P5+1, as they call it. This means the 5 members of the UN Security Council plus Germany. These discussions were rudely interrupted almost a year ago. They would be willing to go back to the table if they are respected in terms of this. They are signatory of the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, so they are allowed to enrich uranium for civilian purposes and in their own territory. But even, remember, 2 years ago, when Brazil and Turkey brokered a swap agreement, uranium would be enriched, then transferred to Turkey, and then back to Iran. The Brazilians and the Turks, they spent 18 hours non-stop in Tehran discussing with them this swap agreement, and they clinched a deal. So this means that it's possible to clinch a deal with their nuclear program. They have to be respected as a regional power. And the U.S. strategy, whatever the government in power, Bush administration, Obama administration, doesn't matter. It's, like we were just mentioned, threats, sanctions, threats, and the roll over and die approach. It will never work.
It's like the Teddy Roosevelt puff up your chest and, carry a giant stick and use it.
Exactly. So, and in one of the pieces that I wrote this week for Tom Dispatch, there's the red line angle, which for the U.S. is always very important. The problem is the red line is shifting all the time. It used to be you cannot enrich uranium. Then it changed. Leon Panetta said that like 2 weeks ago. You cannot build a nuclear bomb.
Right. And he says we know they're not building a bomb.
Everybody who is not even an expert, apart from the National Intelligence Agency, apart from the IAEA inspectors, everybody knows that they are not building a bomb. And the Supreme Leader himself, he had a fatwa, a ruling edict, where he explicitly said that building a nuclear bomb or possessing nuclear weapons is anti-Islamic. And these guys, they follow their religious code, the Shiite religious code, very strictly. And Khomeini, the founder of the Islamic Republic, he was saying that from the beginning, 79, 80, and during the Iran-Iraq war during the 80s, all the time, we will never build a nuclear bomb. It's anti-Islamic. So the point is, why do they really need a nuclear energy? It's to free the oil that they have. They produce, they export 2.5 million barrels of oil a day to export it to gain foreign currency. And they have refinement problems as well because of the sanctions, especially. So they have a case. And on top of it, they're signatory of the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Everything that they do is monitored by the IAEA. There was an IAEA theme in Iran the last few days. And they are monitoring this new underground enrichment plant near the holy city of Qom as well. So anything that they do, the inspectors know what they're doing. It's impossible for Iran to build a nuclear bomb without the IAEA knowing. Absolutely out of the question.
Right, but instead of sitting down and talking, we've got U.S. commandos. This is out of the Atlantic Monthly, I believe. Yeah, the Atlantic Monthly group. Commandos are getting close to the Iran border. We've got scientists being assassinated. And then we have reports from Turkey saying that Iran plans to attack the U.S. embassy. And how credible is that?
No, this is completely stupid. First of all, the only thing that they don't want at the moment is to push for a confrontation. On the contrary, they are being pushed for a confrontation by both U.S. and Israel. And the regional players know it. Like in terms of Turkey, for instance, I'm talking about the highest levels. Turkish Foreign Minister Davutoglu, he was in Tehran only a few days ago. And they were discussing that as well. And they were discussing ways of mutual cooperation in the future, including coming back to the table within the next few days in Istanbul, in Turkey, to talk to the Americans and Europeans again. But when you look at the letter we were discussing a few minutes ago, how are they going to discuss the rollover and die approach? It's impossible, right?
Right. Yeah. Man, Iran's not alone, though, in this battle. They've got some allies that are pretty big. And they've got China. Russia has already said that the U.S. should not attack. What's going to happen if we do, in fact, if these commandos do start invading or get captured behind enemy lines? Is that going to be considered an act of war?
It is not only it is an act of war, but it will be a huge propaganda coup for them. Can you imagine if you have a commando in southeast Iran or southwest Iran, which are very, very touchy areas, or in the south near the Persian Gulf, where most of the oil and gas is? For them, it would be an enormous propaganda coup. And considering the mishaps in Afghanistan, it's not far-fetched to think that some of these commanders will be arrested sooner or later, right?
Yeah.
So the killing of scientists, can you imagine if these were Israeli scientists killed by Iran? We'll be already at World War III, right? But the other way around is permissible. So the double standards in terms of the West, they are cosmic, in fact. Now it's like a meteorite. It's obvious. So, but they are, what I'm getting from my sources in Tehran, the leadership, they are treading very carefully. They want negotiations. They won't be intimidated into a mishap or a fatal mistake, especially in the Gulf. The only way they would react really violently is if this oil embargo by the US and the Europeans are meeting on Monday to decide about the oil embargo. If this is in effect starting in June, then they will react somehow. And it could be something related to the Persian Gulf, because then their backs will be against the wall. But they might not even react, because if they are dealing with, like in one of my pieces, I talk about that. They are dealing with a lot of countries in their own currencies. So the petrodollar for Iran is over. And this, in the long run, for a lot of developing countries, can be a great idea. Let's buy dollar in our own currencies or in a basket of currencies. So one of the reasons that the US hegemony all over the world is so strong is because of the petrodollar. And there are cracks already in this armor. A few days ago, Prime Minister of China, Wen Jiabao, went to visit what? The Persian Gulf itself. He went to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the Emirates. They made a swap deal with the Emirates. A few $1 billion is just the beginning. But for the Chinese, they always say that, first you need a little stone, then you get the whole mountain. So the little stone is the Emirates already have yuan in their vaults as well.